Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, our Lunch and Learn about autism and employment. My name is Emily Ross, and I am the Specialist Vocational Advisor at Beyond Autism. Today, we're going to look at the statistics relating to autistic people who are employed. In 2021, the Office for National Statistics published a new report, and it shows that just under 22% of autistic adults are in any kind of employment. This means that only 1 in 5 people with autism have either a full or a part-time paid job, when the majority of autistic people do want to work. The disability employment gap is also too big, with around half of disabled people in work compared to over 80% of non-disabled people. As I'm sure everyone will agree, that those numbers are too low for people with autism to be in work, and hopefully they'll improve soon. At Beyond Autism, when we talk about employment, we also think about meaningful activity and why employment is important. The benefits of employment are much greater than just getting paid. You get a sense of purpose. So obviously, if you've got a job and you've got a routine, you're waking up, you're going to work, and you feel a sense of accomplishment when you've achieved at your work. It also increases your social circle. So obviously, that's a great way of meeting friends and increasing what you can do outside of work. Obviously, your financial freedom improves. So when you're getting paid, you're then able to afford things, and it can improve your mental health. So obviously, if you've got a sense of purpose and a routine, you'll feel valued. You'll start to feel a bit more confident in yourself, hopefully, and you feel like you've got an aim in life. So for all of us, if employment is important, it should be an option for everyone. And I believe that everyone who can work and wants to work should be given the opportunity to do so. They just might need a little bit of support, which we'll talk about soon. So the numbers of autistic people in work are quite low, and a lot of that is down to the barriers that they face. So autistic people face a number of barriers, and it can begin from the very start of searching for a job. So the job advert, where is it advertised? If you don't know where the job will be advertised and you don't know where to look for jobs, then how can you apply? Then when you do apply, the application stage, every job is a bit different. Some you need to complete an application form, some you need to send in a CV. So having those differences can be a barrier of understanding what information you need and what forms you need to complete and how to complete the forms. Then if you manage to apply for the job correctly, the interview stage can also be a huge barrier. We've all had interviews where we found them challenging, I'm sure. But as we go for more interviews in our own lives, we pick up on kind of what's expected, how to dress, what things we need to say, what questions might be asked of us. However, someone who hasn't been to an interview before, that's a huge challenge, and it can be a huge barrier. And then if they're lucky enough to be successful in their interview, once they're in work, there's barriers in place in the work environment which can stop them successfully maintaining their job. So that could be another reason why the numbers are so low. So often there's a lack of understanding or awareness of what autism is and what autistic people can do. There are also employers are often unaware of the barriers which are in place. The whole application process and job interviews, that's kind of been done for a long time. So often employers are just unaware that that is a challenge for people. Obviously, since the pandemic, employers have had to adapt by offering video interviews, and that's a great way of making things a bit more accessible for some people. Employers can also have misconceptions of autism and can think that because they know one autistic person, that they'll know everyone with autism. And we all know that it's not a one size fits all approach to support. It needs to be personalised. So, we need to increase employers' awareness and understanding about that. And employers can also be scared that there's a lack of support in place for once they've employed an autistic person. But as we'll discuss, that's not actually correct. So in the Equality Act in 2010, employers must make reasonable adjustments to accommodate for a person's disability or health condition so that they're not disadvantaged in the workplace compared to their colleagues. So what is reasonable is obviously up for debate. However, there are kind of common examples which we'll go through. So at the interview stage, obviously I mentioned having a video interview rather than an in-person interview. That could be of a benefit for some people. They could also allow a job coach or an employment advisor to come to the interview if that individual needed it, so that they can be prompted when answering questions. We can also advise employers to give the questions before the interview. To make that fair, they could offer that as a to all candidates. They could offer the questions before the interview so that all candidates can prepare, and then that way no one has an advantage. But then that way an autistic person will know what's going to be asked and what's coming up, and can hopefully answer the questions a bit easier than just asking a question on the spot that they're unprepared for. We could also encourage employers to conduct a work trial rather than a formal interview, so the candidate can showcase their skills and ability, and then maybe afterwards have an informal chat about how that went and talk about any other skills or experience they might have. That's becoming a lot more common as well as an option, so that's good to see. But obviously it depends on what job role they've applied for, if that's applicable. Then we have reasonable adjustments in work, allowing an employee to have adjusted start or finish times. So for example, it could be traveling in the rush hour makes them very anxious. So it could be that they either start work a bit earlier to avoid the really busy time, or start a little bit later. It could be that, because they've got a freedom pass, for example, and they need to use the train, it could be that reason why their start times or finish times have been adjusted. It could also be that their task lists, so what they need to do in their role, the employee could have a written or a picture task list dependent on what's applicable to them, so that they can remember to complete all their tasks, or remember to complete their tasks in the correct order if they have to do their tasks in a certain order. Task lists are great for that. It could be that they have extra support, so extra meetings, so that they understand that they're doing the right thing and that they feel supported, so that they know who to talk to if there's a problem. It could also be that they have a mentor or a buddy in place, or a kind of colleague who's maybe been at the organisation longer, who is doing the same or similar role, who can support that individual so that they know I've got to do this and that, and I'm doing that correctly, and I go to that person if I need any questions answered. Often employers have found that adjustments benefit all staff and also benefit their productivity. So, for example, colour coding cleaning products, or having pictures on or words on shelves in storerooms, in warehouses. They're reasonable adjustments that are commonplace now, and often considered best practice, but to begin with, it would have just been an adjustment for one member of staff or one team to make them a bit more efficient. We also could look into improving the employment statistics by discussing job carving and job design. So job carving is when someone can do the majority of tasks in a job, but they may struggle with one or two of the others. So I've got on there an example of if it was in retail, they might struggle with money, so they wouldn't be maybe on the till, they would focus on replenishing the stock. But it could be if they were in an office setting, they didn't answer the phone, for example, to begin with, because maybe that might have a lot of anxiety. So that could be something that is kind of taken away from their task list and from their role. It can be things that potentially that individual can work on achieving, but obviously it would depend on the circumstance, the role, and the individual and what support they have. But that's a great way of including someone in the workplace, because they might be fantastic at stock control or other admin tasks, if they were in the office, but it could just be one or two things is a barrier. Then we also have job design. Excuse me. Job design is when an organisation takes other employers, takes tasks from other employees to create a specific role. So talking about office role, it could be that all the basic admin tasks, so shredding, photocopying, filing, potentially answering the phone as well if that individual was comfortable with that. It could be that they do that, all those tasks, so the other employees have more time to complete their main tasks, but then this individual has a job which is useful and meaningful and is need to be done. So it's just about discussing with employers if these things are possible, and often employers are very keen on doing these job carving and job design. They're just unaware of it. So when we have conversations, it can be a good thing for everyone involved. So talking about the support that's there for employees who would like to get into work, but also employers who would like to employ someone with autism or a disability. There's government funding from the Department for Work and Pensions called Access to Work. And this is for anyone who needs the support in work, who's got a disability, long-term health condition, autism, etc. It can fund specialist equipment or job coaching. It could pay for travel training support if that's what the individual needs, or taxis if they're very anxious about getting to and from work. It really depends on the individual and the organisation and the role of what is going to be funded for. The grant does take into account the size of the employer's organisation. So obviously small businesses will get a lot more support with the funding because they obviously have less money to afford to contribute towards, a specific adjustment that might be needed. However, obviously a larger employee like Tesco, for example, have more money, and more employers, more employees, so they will have a little bit less support from the grant, but they would still be able to get it, and it's definitely worth applying for and investigating. What we can do to help as an organisation is we can increase employer confidence by improvements to education. So offering training, for example. So we offer free online training, and we can also offer tailored training to suit the organisation and staff needs. So we offer webinars, we can offer in-person training if that's what an employer needs. So it could be autism awareness, or it could be reasonable adjustments in the workplace. It really depends on what the employer would need. And we have also launched an employment toolkit, which hopefully a lot of you know about. So we launched our employability toolkit in September 2021. It includes vocational assessments, so the individual can make sure that they get the right level of support, and their vocational profile. So it has everything about their work history and support needs, and what aspirations they've got, and it's tailored as a person-centered plan to suit them in their workplace. Also, we've got information about communication and sensory needs, so that employers can feel a lot more confident about how to support an autistic individual. I'm just going to quickly show some of the toolkit now. So you can download it and request a hard copy as well. And yeah, it's all color coded, so I'm not sure how great you can see this, but the orange section is for employers and the blue sections are for individuals. And obviously this page can apply to either, so that everyone knows exactly what section they need to look at. We have bits about communication, which our therapies team have supported. Bits about behaviour and sensory needs. Again, our therapies team and behaviour analysts help to support to produce this. And then we've got the approaches to support. So here's some vocational assessment. And to go alongside the toolkit, we also have a resources booklet, a resource pack, which has more resources in, more assessments. So it could be that the individual needs a visual cue of what task they're doing first and what they're going to do next. So this is obviously a blank copy that you can fill in depending on what that individual needs are. We've got a bit more complex one, so a 3-step one. And yeah, there's lots of different resources in the booklet, including a kind of traffic light system of tasks, and what support they might need with their tasks. So yeah, it's very useful for individuals and for employers. And yeah, hopefully we have some questions from people now. So I've got a question from Jane, and Jane has asked, off the back of reasonable adjustments, how do you think employers feel if a more severe autistic worker like her son needed one-to-one with them throughout the job. I think, to be honest, Jane, it really depends on the employer and on the job role. Hopefully, if your son was going to a job and getting a job and needed that support, there would hopefully be a level of communication with the employer beforehand, and they would be supportive of that. Often in my working history, I've found that employers are actually really on board with it. I think they just worry that they're going to have to provide the support. And obviously, if they have to provide the one-to-one support, they either might not deliver the support correctly, or obviously it means that whichever colleague is given that one-to-one support for the tasks can't then complete their own tasks. So if we just need to make sure that employers understand that the support would actually come from a job coach who's trained. Obviously, that's where the access to work funding would come in as well. So it either wouldn't cost them anything, depending on the size level of the employer, or it would cost them very little, but it would really benefit that individual that they're hopefully willing to employ. So often I've found once employers know that, they're very keen and very happy to accommodate that. We also have one from David. So David's asked, once a person has a job, how do we help them progress with their career? Is there anything we can do to help? So the vocational profile that I talked about, I'm just going to pop it on the screen so you can see a little bit about it. It's in the employability toolkit. The vocational profile is kind of like a CV, which also has an area of support needs. So it's got all about their kind of personality and what experience they've had at school, and also work experience, but also what support needs they might have. But then there's a bit of about what kind of career or job they would like to do. So I think updating their vocational profile with them on a regular basis is very important, because then you can see that the individual knows how to get into their career path, if it's viable, if they need to maybe do a training course, or maybe need to get some experience, and then also speak to their employer and see, is this job something that they can progress in, and if so, how do they need the support to complete that extra training, etc. So I think it's all about communicating with the individual first and foremost, because obviously it's about them and their job and their career, but also communicate with the employers and making sure that the communication stays open. And a follow-up from Jane, who's asked, do you think that access to work funding would fund a one-to-one? So it has done in the past, yeah. It has funded job coaching on a one-to-one support level. It really does look into individual circumstance. So it can often be on a sliding scale of support. So for example, at the beginning of their job role, it can be that they have one-to-one support for the entirety of their time at work. But then it can be that as they're becoming more confident in their role and becoming more confident in their ability, the support might be withdrawn, depending on if that's applicable. But obviously, if someone had health needs or a condition which meant that they would permanently need the one-to-one support, that is still possible, yes. We've just got a question come from Yasmin, who's asked if there's a list of organisations who are keen to employ autistic individuals with very high needs. So on the government website, there is a list of disability confident employers. How great that is up for debate, but there is a list there, and if an employer is on there as a disability confident employer, and you're finding that they're not willing to support, you can obviously mention that to them, that the organisation is disability confident, so should be willing to support someone if they need that. So there are lists out there, and obviously, again, it depends kind of, for example, one branch of a supermarket might be better than the same chain at a different branch, because it'll depend on kind of the management and the staff that are there and how kind of receptive they are to it. But obviously, if one are doing really well and another isn't, and it's the same organisation, then again, you can mention that, and hopefully they'll become a bit more receptive of employing someone who needs extra support. So I think there's one more question coming in. I'll just... So it's more of a comment, but we can discuss it. Someone said that the trouble is that employers tend to think of autism as the classic higher functioning, good with maths stereotype, and don't understand the more severe presentations of autism. So that's exactly what we were talking about at the beginning of the webinar. So it's all about educating the employers and kind of getting rid of those stereotypes through training, autism awareness, challenging the stereotypes as well, making sure that people and employers understand that just because they know one person with autism, they haven't met every autistic person. As we all know, everyone's very different. Even if you didn't have autism or another disability, every person is completely different. So you can't have a one size fits all for that. So I think we have come to the end of all the questions. So I just want to thank everyone for listening. And if anyone has any questions after the event, then please do get in touch. I think my email has been put in the chat box. So please feel free to email me if you've got any questions or comments after the Lunch and Learn has finished, because I know that often that can be the case. But yeah, thank you all for attending and listening.